Well, it's true. These guys are just weird. And it's, you know, they're running for He-Man Women Haters Club.
It's not just a weird style that he brings. It's that this leads to weird policies.
And by the way, don't you find some of their stuff to just be plain weird?
There are just some words, some attacks during campaign season that stick. George H.W. Bush was a wimp. John Kerry was a flip-flopper. And Dan Quayle wasn't smarter than a fifth grader. These attacks worked because they tapped into what the public already believed about these candidates. So what do people think about the GOP ticket this year? Well, it's obvious. Everybody thinks they're kind of weird. Tonight to talk about it, Tim Miller is the former spokesman for the Republican National Committee. He is now writer-at-large for The Bulwark, and Sarah Longwell is publisher of The Bulwark and host of the Focus Group podcast. They both join me now. Tim, I got to ask you this, because I started looking through history. When we were putting production together, I was like, yeah, this is hitting like wimp. This is hitting like flip-flopper. It seems like weird sticks. Why is that working? Why is that working not just with Trump? Because he's been the same guy all along, but now weird seems to be sticking to him. J.D. Vance is a newcomer. Weird is sticking to him. Why is it working?
Because of J.D. Vance. I just think it ended up being another in a short or medium length or maybe long line of reasons why Donald Trump shouldn't have picked J.D. Vance, why he's hurting the ticket. Here's the thing. Trump is weird in his own way. Right? He's like this celebrity figure. He was a reality show host. He almost kind of owns being weird. He does the electrocuting sharks thing and the Hannibal Lecter thing, and it's weird in its own way, but that didn't like stick with people. J.D. Vance is weird in this creepy way that you want him to be away from you. Like, he has negative charisma. He starts talking about when women should bear their children. And you start thinking, I don't want a weird and creepy guy like you having any say, actually, over when, my daughter, my sister, or myself, if I was a woman, my child when I have a child. It's a turnoff. And I think that is now splashing back up onto Trump. And we saw this in the midterms work also as a very successful hit, particularly on Blake Masters in Arizona, who is very Vancian in the way that he's creepy and weird. And I think that bringing Vance onto this ticket raised the salience of this in a way that's the Democrats are really using with a lot of effect.
Yeah, Tim, I say this, and I've said this to many people, as a former Ohio resident and Ohio voter, J.D. Vance is not very well liked. People think he's weird there. There is not a bar in Niles, Youngstown, Toledo, or Akron that he could walk into right now and get a free beer. But there's a lot of other congressmen and members of sort of government there that could do it. So my question, Sarah, for you is, you've done a focus group on how people are responding to this ticket now. I want to play some sound from that and get your thoughts on the other side.
I don't remember where, but one of the vibes that I get off of him is that he comes up very, borderline arrogant. And I imagine, Trump to be also arrogant, even during his speech and stuff. I don't think it's a good mix.
He kind of was against Trump in the past, so he's definitely switched a whole 180. But now he's taking on the bully portion. He's just shaking the saber and kind of, he's really stirring the pot.
Now, Sarah, look, I want to couch these terms properly. Everybody understands different things about J.D. Vance, and he's new. People are still just getting a new impression of him. But the new impression seems to be bad. I mean, historically, most people don't get the nomination for vice president and then come out of the RNC with a lower approval rating. What are you hearing in these focus groups? And other than arrogance, why is it he's not connecting, and why is he dragging down Trump?
So here's one of the things that voters can sniff out really clearly, which is inauthenticity, right? So Trump is weird, but he's authentically weird. And he's got a celebrity factor that allow people to give him kind of the wiggle room that you give a celebrity. J.D. Vance was once a normal person who started to pretend to be a super weird person in order to get in the good graces of the MAGA crowd. And so that inauthenticity comes off as sort of creepy, as inauthentic, and the voters could just see that coming from a mile away. And frankly, people don't like him. I mean, this is what I've heard, and I didn't just do one group of swing voters. I have done now several groups of swing voters, and honestly, I have not seen voters as negative on a candidate since Trump voters after Mike Pence refused to overturn the election. Like, that's how sort of irritated these voters sound about J.D. Vance. And I think Tim kind of hit on something there that I think is really important, which is Donald Trump has a bunch of baked-in baggage, right? He has a bunch of things about him that they know he's a misogynist. They know that he's, says all these off-the-wall things. They know that he's kind of a racist. But J.D. Vance, reanimates that for people. It reminds people of it. It draws it back out after it having been baked in for so long. And so the voters are suddenly saying, oh, yeah, I remember that Trump is just also kind of a weird scumbag, and J.D. Vance has raised that salience.
Tim, I want to ask you this. It seems to me, and like I said, can't get into a bar. He's essentially the Ted Cruz of Ohio. I mean, they'll vote for the guy, but they can't stand him. J.D. Vance is sort of like the worst mini-me possible for Donald Trump, because as Sarah pointed out, he's like encapsulates all the terrible things about Donald Trump with none of the inherent charm. If you were consulting the Republican Party right now, just very quickly, what would you tell them to do? They're not going to drop the guy. It's only 98 days away from the election, but he is a drag on the campaign to the point where I think he's one or two bad rallies away from being a viral meme that they're never going to be able to escape.
Yeah, I think they definitely wish they could have dropped him, but they can't. They're stuck with him. Here's my advice, which I'm happy to give because I know they won't take it, because it's just not in their just not in the way of being in MAGA world. But J.D. Vance should stop with the fake tough guy act, stop with the attack dog act. He looks uncomfortable in his own skin. He's not natural. He comes off as arrogant, as that focus group voter said. And instead, he should just go back to talking about how working class people in the Midwest need help and talk about policy issues and act kind of like a nerd. I don't know how much that would actually help them, but I think that would at least stanch the bleeding a little bit. But I don't think these guys can help themselves besides be cruel. And so I don't think that that's advice that they're going to take.
Yeah, they're just going to be weird, and they're going to run with it, even if it makes them lose the race. Sarah Longwell and Tim Miller, thank you so much for joining us tonight on All In.